Final Fantasy, the series that constantly defies its own name in order to tell as many stories as they can about spiky-haired babies stabbing God. Equally famous for its contributions to both gaming and hentai, this legendary series is not without its troubles. These are the many scandals of Final Fantasy. My fellow Americans, I am once again in Geology's top secret government-funded flesh room, where they test and ingest their 22-time award-winning skin, hair and body products. My favourite thing about Geology is still their skincare quiz, which helps level 1 skincare users like myself build a routine based on questions like what skin problems do you have, or whether you prefer Aerith or Tifa. Every time I lather on this pristine pore paste, it feels like someone just cast benediction on my face. Woo! And I was surprised at just how quickly you start to see results. Having no skin would suck, and science has yet to prove whether or not our skin stays on without the help of Geology's amazing skincare products. So, if you'd like to keep your skin on, use code MINIKUDO70 or scan the QR code on screen to get an exclusive 70% off their award-winning skincare trial set. You'll also save big on any additional items you add to your trial. That's G-E-O-L-O-G. In mid-2021, Final Fantasy XIV data miners excavated references to an emote that read /eat pizza, which worryingly implies that Italians exist within the world of Eorzea. A dubious source, also known as a screenshot of a tweet, stated that this was part of an upcoming Grubhub promotion, but that sounds fucking stupid, so everyone just thought it was a joke. Still, this wasn't entirely out of the question. Final Fantasy XIV had previously run a similar promotion with Butterfinger, where you could earn yourself a big beautiful chocolate orb to ride around on if you fingered enough butt. In December, it was announced that the Eat Pizza emote came from an upcoming Grubhub promotion. That sounds fucking stupid, and it is, which only made it all the more enticing for FF14's player base. For a limited time, place an order on Grubhub and use promo code NWalker at checkout to earn your own Eat Pizza emote. Plus, get free delivery powered by the Grubhub guarantee for orders placed during the Game Awards on Thursday, December 9th. With so many players enticed by the idea of their beautiful Viera scarfing down mouthfuls of cheesy sauce dough, outrage occurred when it was discovered that you could only redeem the emote on one character per account. This isn't as bad as in alt-heavy MMOs like World of Warcraft, as you can theoretically do all the content on one Final Fantasy XIV character. But it's still frustrating for the players who play multiple characters for whatever reason. Furthermore, and I can't really understand why, Square Enix believed that only Americans would be interested in the consumption of greasy, high-calorie foods, and as such, the promotion was unavailable anywhere else. But even if you did live in America, the rollout on December 9th was less than ideal. Final Fantasy XIV players, who would never normally spend money on fast food, were enraged when they discovered that their order wasn't even guaranteed to get an emote code. After not receiving any evidence on my receipt/order confirmation that I applied the discount code, I reached out to Grubhub support. It didn't seem like they were able to apply it to my order retroactively, so I think I just paid $25 for an emote that I won't get. Parentheses, didn't need the food. Just an FYI, if you placed your Grubhub order through their website, there is a very high likelihood that the promo code was not applied to your order. Can we please get hashtag Grubhub doesn't care trending on Twitter? They clearly don't give a single fuck. They made millions off us in a weekend and aren't refunding, aren't attempting to do anything to fix the situation. I'm beyond pissed. It turns out the codes were being sent out a week after the promotion ran, which only furthered confusion. Nobody, not even Grubhub customer support, knew or cared what was going on. The terms and conditions claimed that the codes were limited in number and would be served on a first come, first ordered a medium Big Mac combo basis. Meanwhile, some customer support reps claimed that the codes would be distributed via a lottery system and that they were limited to only 2,000 codes per day. But it turns out both were wrong. In a later FAQ, short for frequently asked questions, it was revealed that there was no limit to the amount of potential pizza performance participants and that they didn't use a lottery system. Unfortunately, this did nothing to ease the pain of the many users who, tragically, could still not eat pizza. Over the coming months, players grew frustrated at their lack of code. Some decried legal action, claiming that a class action lawsuit could be coming for Grubhub and Square Enix. Now, on one hand, it is pretty poor form to run this big promotion and then not have the infrastructure to support it. On the other hand, it's an emote that makes your character eat pizza in Final Fantasy XIV. I wish I could tell you that the players fought the good fight and Square Enix let them have the pizza emote. I wish I could tell you that. But Final Fantasy XIV is no fairy tale world. Weeks, months, and even years later, many players were still unable to eat pizza. Truly, one of the most tragic stories I've covered yet. This is actually not the first unkillable boss battle I've covered on this channel, but it's definitely the most bullshit. While EverQuest's Keraphim was unkillable for story reasons, this next one was unkillable for, I don't know, mysterious Japanese reasons. Notorious monsters are a special class of enemies in Final Fantasy XI, the first MMO in the series. These goofy fucks are usually important plot characters or part of epic quest lines, and have unique moves and loot as a result. Unlike other games that lazily flop their thick, juicy bosses onto the face that is the game's open world, Final Fantasy XI makes you work for their notorious monsters. While some spawn naturally, others require more esoteric methods, like trading items to specific characters. These bosses were meant to recreate the optional super bosses from previous Final Fantasy games, like Final Fantasy VII's Emerald Weapon, or Final Fantasy VIII's Ultimate Weapon, or Final Fantasy IX's, no really guys, this weapon's the biggest weapon. In April of 2005, Final Fantasy XI received an update that contained a cryptic patch note. New notorious monsters have been added to the Chains of Promathia areas. As mentioned, some of the methods to spawn these notorious monsters can get quite complex, and as such, it took players 7 months from the release of this patch to discover the final boss in a long chain of bosses, Absolute Virtue. Linkshell Clan Order of the Blue Garter defeated what everyone thought was the final boss at the time, Jailer of Love, only for Absolute Virtue to spawn immediately afterwards. After an hour of fighting these max level, well-geared players, Absolute Virtue was down to 98% health. In addition to a large pool of HP, Absolute Virtue regenerates an insane amount of health per tick. But the real kicker was its cast of Meteor, which will pretty much wipe any group that doesn't specifically build around mitigating its damage. While some strategies were devised over the following months, it was almost a full year later that the first kill occurred. Players used a method that allowed them to exploit the walls in the zone in order to deal damage to enemy adds on the other side of the wall with no fear of being attacked back. After a few more Link shells scored kills this way, Square Enix came down on them like a sack of Final Fantasy themed bricks. I couldn't think of something Final Fantasy themed that you'd put in a sack that was heavy. So. Apparently the only viable method found after almost a year of attempts was deemed unacceptable, and players who used it faced ban warnings. Still, this wasn't entirely unreasonable, as pretty much any MMO would consider terrain exploits cheating. A second method was eventually found, which involved a group of Dark Knight players using a combination of multi-hit weapons and certain spells in order to deal huge amounts of damage at once. Interestingly, this method was also deemed incorrect by Square Enix. Absolute Virtue was patched in order to gradually resist one of the key spells in the strategy, rendering it useless. Unlike the wall method, this used 0 exploits and was simply a creative combination of weapons and skills. As players grew increasingly frustrated with Square Enix for arbitrarily changing the rules, the developers decided to throw the players a bone by giving them a hint during the Vanifest conference in 2006. By killing specific creatures and then attacking Absolute Virtue with elemental spells based on which in-game day it was, you could nullify his powerful health regeneration. While this nullified one of the most aggravating aspects of the fight, it was still far too difficult for even the most dedicated players to figure out. Another year passed, and players had still not found a legitimate means of defeating abhorrent vagina. Sorry. Square once again released a hint, this time in the form of a video. While it initially raised more questions than answers, players eventually deduced that they were trying to show that you could lock out Absolute Virtue's powerful abilities by countering them with your own. Both players and Absolute Virtue have abilities called 2-hour skills, which are powerful moves that have a 2-hour long cooldown. In order to lock out one of Absolute Virtue's 2-hour skills, a player would have to cast the exact same skill at the exact same time he does. That might not sound too bad, but the timing on this was so tight that by the time the combat log told you that Absolute Virtue was casting, it was already too late. While Square Enix's video did show them beat Absolute Virtue using this method, the fact that they were either using an internal test server or their close proximity to the actual game servers meant their latency was low enough that hitting this unforgiving time window was possible. Even with this method, it was revealed by a GM that the fight would take 18 fucking hours to complete. Ironic for a game that opens with a splash screen reminding you not to let the game overtake your life. Around this time, another link shell started to have a hoon on a different undefeated notorious monster, the Pandemonium Warden, which I think is just another name for riot police. The players estimated it'd be a 3 to 6 hour long fight, and that if it went over 8 hours, then it was just 18 hours later, they posted, people were passing out and getting physically ill. We decided to end it before we risked turning into a horrible news story about how video games were in people's lives. Fight start time, 3:30 PM EST. End time, 9 AM. Fuck you, Square Enix. They would later clarify what happened in a blog post. 18 hours is not the length of the fight, it is the length of our attempt. There is no doubt in my or anyone else's mind that to beat it, you would need another 2 to 5 hours, making this closer to a 20 to 24 hour fight. Most members took no breaks at all, outside of waiting for weakness to wear if they died. Personally, I never even went to piss. Adrenaline covered up everything for me. We did not take shifts or rotate, and did not expect an 18-hour fight. After the media began to pick up on the ridiculousness that was an 18-hour fight, as well as players, saying that they don't want to do that, Square Enix announced that they would be making changes to both the Pandemonium Warden and Absolute Virtue. The past 2 weeks have seen considerable feedback from players regarding the amount of time required to combat the Pandemonium Warden, a recently implemented notorious monster. Adjustments have been made to Jailer of Love, Absolute Virtue and pets, and Pandemonium Warden and pets, in areas such as HP value and behavior. Absolute Virtue and Pandemonium Warden will now vanish 2 hours after their appearance, automatically ending the battle. Final Fantasy XI's level cap was later raised from 75 to 99, and the extra power players had access to meant that Absolute Virtue was finally able to be killed. It's believed that, besides the kills that Square Enix deemed invalid, nobody was able to legitimately kill Absolute Virtue before this change. Raids in Final Fantasy XIV are big fat juicy succulent endgame battles run by groups of 8 players. They come in 3 flavors: normal, chocolate, and ultimate, with ultimate being the, ultimate test of skill, but not in a bullshit way like Absolute Virtue, who's also in 14 by the way, although you don't get banned if you beat this one. Much like in other MMOs, raid teams, known as statics, speedrun newly released content for bragging rights over who can get through the most adult diapers in one sitting, and also beat the hardest content first. On January 24th of the year of our Lord 2023, patch 6.31 inseminated Final Fantasy XIV with the game's 5th ultimate raid, the Omega Protocol. 6 days later, the creatively titled Japanese static, Unnamed, announced that they were the first players to complete the raid. While the proof of their announcement was only a screenshot of their victory, most players in the community deemed it legitimate and congratulated them on their victory. This celebration would be short-lived. A few hours later, a video was shared of the attempt, which showed that Unnamed had utilized mods in order to achieve their victory royale. Now, mods are a contentious topic amongst the player base. Unlike other MMOs, which let you mod everything from tweaking your UI to adding Bejeweled, every mod is banned in Final Fantasy XIV. Technically. This doesn't stop a lot of players from using them for lewd uses, as we saw in my video on the illegal Final Fantasy billboard. Of course, letting a player mod Final Fantasy XIV until it resembles Meat and Fuck Kingdom doesn't affect anyone else's gameplay experience, so Square Enix just kind of turns a blind eye to it. The mods used by Unnamed, on the other hand, gave them a distinct gameplay advantage. These mods provided information about party member hitboxes, party member cooldown trackers, and most importantly, a massive adjustment to the camera's maximum zoom distance. This allowed one player to zoom his camera out far enough that they had a full view of the boss arena, which was then streamed to a couple of players who weren't actually fighting in the raid. These players act like coaches or raid leaders, analysing the boss's mechanics and directing the players mid-fight. While this isn't against the rules, being able to zoom out to a full view of the room gives you a clear advantage over the players who can't. As stated in the terms of service for Final Fantasy XIV, the use of third-party tools is strictly prohibited. Players who are determined to be using third-party tools will have their account suspended or permanently banned for repeat offences. It goes without saying that we're aware of world races for high-end duties. As the developers, we're proud to have grown into one of the few games where they're held, and it delights us to see so many players participate as well as spectate with great interest. But a race should be fair, and it's our earnest wish that participants don't use third-party tools. Indeed, we've only released duties that we have proven can be beaten with the game's standard features. Unlike a lot of MMOs, Final Fantasy XIV has a very large console player base. These players have no option to mod their game, and so the players who play on PC, who can, would have an unfair advantage, which may have led to the creation of this rule. Naturally, the player base was enraged that Unnamed had unfairly achieved their world first title. Tired from their marathon gaming session, the members of Unnamed hit the hay, but not before leaving their character logged in order to show off the new raid gear they'd just acquired. The player base, in turn, did the only logical thing. They threw a boldness festival around them. On Japanese Final Fantasy XIV servers, when someone breaks the public social code of conduct, players do what's called Hagaruga Matsuri, or Baldness Festival, where hundreds of players playing naked, white-skinned, bald Rogadin flood the offender's housing plot or cluster around their character to publicly shame them for their offense. Out of shame, some of the members of Unnamed posted apologies to Twitter, with one player saying he would delete all of his characters and quit the game. Some users referred to this as digital seppuku, a phrase which caught on and even trended on Japanese Twitter. I mean, you think Elon Musk is annoying on American Twitter, wait till you see how annoying Japanese Elon Musk is. Game director Yoshi P would offer his thoughts on the controversy, in addition to stating that they will be enacting penalties such as temporary or a permanent account suspension if they confirm the use of third-party tools. He says, "The Ultimate Raid series is the most difficult battle content within Final Fantasy XIV, and we release this content after testing that it can be cleared without the use of any third-party tools. However, if the presumption is that this content will be tackled and cleared with the use of third-party tools, then any reason to develop high difficulty battle content seems to be lost. It's very difficult for me to understand, as a gamer, what the meaning behind using numerous third-party tools to complete the clear first would be. If the illicit use of third-party tools is made clear through our investigations, I, at the very least, will not recognize that team as the true world first." Now, are you ready for the twist? The video revealing the use of third-party tools was actually uploaded a full day before Unnamed announced their victory, and was titled Zoom Hack Zetsu Omega. It was also posted to a brand new YouTube channel with a name which translates to Divine Punishment, while also naming all 8 players in the static in its description. This has led some to believe that this video was released not to show proof of their kill, but from a disgruntled member who wanted to expose them for modding. Omega Protocol would be cleared legitimately a day later by Neverland after a mere 1,032 attempts. June 2017, Square Enix spat Stormblood, Final Fantasy XIV's second expansion, into the game's code. This major content drop doubled the active player base and led to multiple major bottlenecks. This isn't uncommon for major content updates for MMOs, as your player base goes from raiding or PvPing or jerking off in the Balmung Uldar to all doing the exact same quest line at the exact same time. I'm sure anyone who lived through the Warlords of Draenor expansion release will remember how painful it was to set up your garrison. Final Fantasy XIV's players made their way through the intro quests of Stormblood, but quickly hit a Raubahn-shaped roadblock. One of the first quests in the expansion has you enter an instanced fight, which starts as you speak to Raubahn. For those not up with the MMO lingo, instances are copies of dungeons or parts of the world that allow you to complete content by yourself without having to worry about 50 other players running in and stealing all your kills and your beautiful rubies. Unfortunately, servers only have so much space for instances, and with so many players all attempting the exact same quest at the same time, they filled up faster than your mum at a Taco Tuesday orgy. Players who attempted the quest were shown a cutscene which sets up a no doubt thrilling battle, only to get blue balls as they were spat out and an error message was thrown up down the back of their jacket. Now, this wasn't an issue that was solved within an hour, or even a few hours. They should implement a queue. I've been sitting here spamming the quest for over an hour trying to get in. Congestion, I get it, totally expected, but I'd rather sit in for an hour than just try again later. And 10 hours later, it's still broken. The Fringe is nothing but people complaining. They've been there mashing on that quest for 8 to 10 hours. By the way, a few folks asked, it's affecting all worlds, not just North America, not just EU, but Southeast Asia and Japan as well. This is so fucking pathetic now. I've been on for 16 hours now. I hit this quest maybe 30 minutes to an hour after launch, and I've been stuck here since. Unfortunately, instances have no queue system, meaning it's just luck of the draw whether you get in or whether you don't, incentivizing players to park up and spam click the quest objective. In a surprisingly British display, players took queues into their own hands and began to form orderly lines. Because all instances share the same server space, even players who were able to complete the quest or attempt other activities entirely were also hit with the same issue. Players reported being unable to unlock the new samurai class or complete a similar instance fight that occurs not long after Raubahns. Players began to refer to the quest as Raubahn EX or Raubahn Savage, denominators usually used to differentiate between the different difficulties of raid tiers. In their boredom, they even started to write boss guides for him. Square put out multiple posts about the incident, but they're kind of boring and we're both at the point in the video where neither of us care anyway. A few days later, it was reported that the quest was finally doable, and that large waves of players had been completing it at once. However, it seems that these reports caused a huge influx of players who, once again, could not complete the quest. Over time, the bottlenecks fixed themselves, and the legend of Raubahn EX lived on in the hearts and minds of players everywhere, even if some players now think that it's an actual boss fight somewhere in the game.
If you are after another Final Fantasy video, you should check out this one on the illegal Final Fantasy billboard. Or why not check out the many Scannels playlist for more goofy hobby dramas.